Well, thanks everyone for coming today. We're here today to talk about chimeric antigen receptor T-cell therapy, or CAR T-cell therapy. And it's a very exciting new therapy that we have here at Nebraska Medicine, and we've been doing clinical trials on this for a couple of years. And this is a therapy where patients with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma who have failed multiple other therapies and really had no other options to them receive therapy that potentially could keep them in remission for a very long time and were hopefully curative. So in this type of therapy, patients have cells taken out of their blood and lymphocytes, and these are the cells that help us fight infection and help to fight cancer. The problem with patients with lymphoma and potentially other cancers who don't respond to regular therapy, their own immune system, their own lymphocytes do not see their cancer as being foreign and do not fight it. In this case, we take the cells out of the patient's blood. We work together with a pharmaceutical company who actually genetically engineers the cells or teaches them to be able to notify the patient's immune system that it's a foreign substance and help to fight it. In the meantime, the patients receive some chemotherapy to deplete their own immune system, which is not working well. And then they receive back their own stem cells, in this case the CAR T cells, which have been genetically modified to understand their own cancers being foreign. These cells then circulate through the bloodstream, through the bone marrow, through the organs, and find the lymphoma wherever it's hiding and help the patient's own immune system to fight their own lymphoma. This is a very exciting therapy, but can be very toxic in some cases, so it can only be done in certain centers that have the ability to do that, and unfortunately we've been able to do that. We've had clinical trials here for a couple of years, and thanks to those clinical trials, this therapy is now FDA approved and available here at Nebraska Medicine for more patients. So I'd love for Amy to tell her story.
I live in Fort Collins, Colorado, and I'm an elementary school teacher, and I was diagnosed and had 3 different types of chemotherapy over a year that were not successful completely. And I had gotten to the point where there was no other therapy for me to do. So they sent me here. They said it's the best in the nation to see what Dr. Vos would recommend that I do. And I was lucky enough to get into the trial.
And tell them about kind of what you went through for the treatment.
I had chemo first, and then they took the cells. They sent my the T cells away, and then I had chemo, and the cells came back, and I was put in the hospital and given my cells back. And during the 2 weeks afterwards, I had a few complications as far as not knowing what was going on around me and not being able to talk for some of the time. But after 3 weeks, I was almost back to normal and cancer-free. So the most important part.
Yes, the most important part. So this is a therapy that can have many side effects, so it has to be done in a facility such as ours that knows how to deal with those side effects. But thankfully, many patients like Amy are doing well a couple years later.
Yep.
So, awesome.
Talk about why this is such a big deal in the world of cancer and to have here in Nebraska.
Yeah. So this therapy that Amy had right now is for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, one type of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, but we're also doing clinical trials on other types of acute leukemia, and we're going to be having hopefully another one FDA approved soon for acute leukemia that we can have here, as well as potentially multiple myeloma and other types of cancers. And this, the technology potentially in the future could be something that can be utilized for many different types of cancers with a lot of further research. So I think the concept and the technology is something that's going to be greatly expansive over the next several years in a big way.
Can you talk about how long this was in clinical trials and the obstacles you had to overcome to get it to where it is now?
Yeah. So there were some clinical trials that were actually started probably many years ago at local centers, University of Pennsylvania, University of Washington, and they really didn't take off very well at first because it's a very difficult concept and difficult to manufacture these cells. Then there were several pharmaceutical companies that started doing trials just within the past couple years, really, and this has really taken off in a very short time frame over a couple of years and become FDA available in what we call fast track fashion, so that it was done very quickly so that it could get out to patients. And hopefully it'll be many more patients that we can help with this particular treatment over the next several years.
How many can you deal with one time now, Julie?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah. These patients can be very sick, although some of them are not sick at all. So it's a wide variety of patients, and some of the patients can actually be treated as outpatients and be monitored very carefully. Some of the patients do need to be inpatient, of course, when they have complications. So we've only done a couple at the same time, I think maybe 3 at the same time, but I see this expanding, and we're going to be able to hopefully deal with many more than that in the near future.
I think the nice thing is that we've really invested a lot of time in resources in building this program. I can't tell you enough on the clinical trial aspect, just how many hands and brains can touch an individual. And as this therapy continues to evolve, I think Nebraska Medicine is committed to investing the time and the resources to grow this and bring this to the citizens of Nebraska, but also to the region here in the Midwest to come to Nebraska Medicine to get this therapy. And you know, I think that this is only the ground floor, and we're going to see more and more of this in not only in non-Hodgkin's lymphoma but other diseases, as Julie spoke to. So we're very excited. It's a very exciting day for Nebraska Medicine.
We're also going to continue to have many other clinical trials for patients, as well as the FDA-approved products, so multiple different opportunities to treat many patients.
Is there an age range that you can do this type of treatment because of how toxic it can be, or can you use it on kids?
So the particular ones that we have very strict guidelines as far as the FDA approvals. So the 2 that are FDA approved, one is for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma that is for adults, and so it's not used in pediatrics. The other one is actually for children with acute lymphoblastic leukemia, and that goes up to age 25. So they do have pretty strict FDA approvals on them. We don't necessarily go just by age as far as the upper age limit. However, we look at what the patient's ability to get through the treatment might be, what their organ function is, and so we look very carefully at each patient to be able to make sure that they can tolerate it.
Can you talk about how long this process usually takes?
So it can be a prolonged process. We do have to collect the cells. They're sent away for manufacturing, which can take from 2 to 4 weeks. During that time, the patient's lymphoma has to be controlled by various measures, chemotherapy or steroids or other measures. And then the patient comes back, and they're here with us typically for about 4 to 5 weeks after the treatment. So it is a pretty prolonged process.
It's also a paradigm shifting kind of from a thought standpoint from a patient, because a lot of times patients are thinking, get me into remission, get me into remission. But really when you're talking CAR T-cell therapy and what's leading into CAR T-cell therapy is that really you want to preserve their performance status, okay, during this time with giving them therapy that controls their disease, that allows them to continue to have the fitness that when the CAR T-cells are available, they can still get that therapy. And I think that that's a different paradigm that patients aren't necessarily used to having those discussions, but we've become more and more comfortable in just really doing things that keep their quality of life good and their performance status such that we can proceed when the T cells are ready.
Are you able to talk a little bit about how, I guess, in what ways is this an upgrade from therapies that are used before this process?
Mm-hmm. So chemotherapy that we normally use for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma helps to fight any rapidly dividing cells. And the patient's own immune system actually is kind of beaten down by chemotherapy, so that more and more as the patient gets treated, they become resistant to the chemotherapy and their immune system doesn't work correctly. The other comparison would be with an autologous stem cell transplant, which is a similar process. We take the patient's cells, harvest them, freeze them, give them very high doses of chemotherapy to overcome the resistance of the lymphoma and get their own cells back. The problem with that type of therapy is the patient's own immune system still doesn't function properly. So CAR T-cell therapy is really a similar method as far as an autologous stem cell transplant, but we're actually boosting that up by allowing the patient's immune system to actually function and help to fight the lymphoma.
Amy, can you talk about, you're in remission now, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about what this has meant for you? A little bit.
It means that I'm alive today, because when I came, I had a tumor in my chest next to my heart and lungs that was back to the original size, which was about the size of a grapefruit, a large grapefruit. And if I had not been here, come and had the treatment even as quickly as I had, then I just know I wouldn't be alive right now. So I am back teaching full time. I had to take a year off and through the treatments, and I'm back teaching full time. I'm doing everything that I would normally do. So I feel great, and I come back every 3 months and see Dr. Vos and have a PET scan, and so far they've been clean. So
She loves to visit
yes,
Omaha.
I
You
do.
said there's a wide range of side effects that can go with this. Amy, can you talk a little bit about what your experience was, how you felt through the process?
I felt very cared for, because I went through not knowing, not being able to talk for a while, and and my loved ones were not here when I was in the hospital. I said, I'm being taken care of. You don't need to come miss work, but at no time was I ever so nervous that there wasn't somebody that was going to be there for me. This hospital does an amazing job of caring for its patients, and when he said many hands touch you, they do. And I had many specialists coming in to help me. So I guess I was asleep for 2 days and didn't know it. And so that didn't hurt me, since I didn't know it. And when I woke up, I had a hard time speaking, and it came back gradually, and I was shaking a lot. And over about 2 to 3 weeks, everything came back slowly. And then I had to work on my stamina, because it really, excuse me, takes a lot out of you. And I had been in bed that whole time, most of it. So it makes you nervous, but you get through it, and on the other side of it was only good news for me. So
those side effects happen in some patients, but not all
Yeah.
patients. And so that's why they have to be observed very carefully during that time period, because you don't know who that patient is that's going to have those complications. So close observation.
And it's relapse refractory large cell lymphoma or aggressive non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and other aggressive lymphomas, which CAR T cells can be available for. They are unmet medical needs. These are refractory patients, and I think CAR T-cell therapy is filling the space for those patients in need. And Amy, your story speaks to that.
How long ago did you go through your treatment?
a year ago this past November.
Amy, what does it mean for you to hear that this is now commercially available here at Nebraska Medicine?
I think when you texted me and asked me that question originally, it was one of those where when I heard that it was available for other people, I couldn't stop smiling, and kind of like right now, you almost want to burst into tears because you're just so happy that people will get the same treatment I had and be able to live hopefully long, healthy lives, not hear that, sorry, there's nothing else we can do, because that's a horrible thing to have to hear. So it means the world to me, and especially that this hospital is going to be offering it, because I know what service they provide and how wonderful they are. So it means even more.
Do we know how many other hospitals are prepared to offer this treatment as well?
There's quite an extensive process that has to be gone through for the approval to be able to offer this treatment. And so the companies are just kind of ramping up slowly nationwide to get that done. And so there haven't actually been very many patients even nationwide treated on the FDA-approved product yet, just a handful.
Have you done any here that since the outside the trial?
Well, we still have the trials going on, so we have lots of patients being treated that way, and we have gotten our, gone through all our training and gotten our FDA approval now. So we have, I think last I heard, 6 patients in screening to get the FDA approved product, hopefully within the next few weeks or months.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Do you think this could, usually stem cells are the, like the treatment du jour. Would this be one that would be done before?
Before a stem cell transplant?
Do you see a day of
Probably not the way it currently is approved. It's approved for patients who have failed the regular stem cell transplant or they aren't candidates for transplant. But the next step would be to see if this can actually be an improvement upon a regular stem cell transplant. And so that's probably the next set of clinical trials that are going to be done.
Amy, what do you look at differently now when you go back to school?
I just appreciate my life a lot more than I did before, and also the people that talk about going, you know, having cancer and going through it. I think until you actually go through it, you really don't realize how devastating it can be. Even, you know, when you survive it, the process is just so difficult. And so I just appreciate every moment and love spending time with my grandson, who is there to help me remember to fight as hard as I could to get through everything. So it's a good day.
Is there anything else any of you guys want to add?
Proud to be at Nebraska Medicine and proud to provide this therapy to our patients.
And we're very grateful that we're really the only center in the immediate region that can provide this, and certainly would like to provide that opportunity to all the patients in the region that we can.